Hey everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and we just had Vanguard Day at our locals, which, if you know, it's a sort of competitive event. Usually they have like promos and then some sort of either like foiled card or playmat as a prize. So kind of an excuse every month to kind of go out and play more seriously, more competitively. And this also coincides with Set 7 releasing, which is a set I really liked. If you've seen the other videos on the channel, you know I bought a case for it and am planning to play pretty much everything. There's the capital M meta with Bob Sagra, there's Artisaria, which is the newest lyrical deck. There's also Vice Ruger, which is way overhyped, and then, as well as some like set originals like Argo Siren and Houndraiser that are all like really cool decks that I wanted to play. So, me being the indecisive person that I am, I went to Twitter and put up a poll. So, the poll ended up voting for Artisaria. So, that is what I brought with me. Ended up going 3-1, got 7th place out of 24 people. It's a pretty small shop. So, I figure we could do a deck profile and then recap our tournament. So, first things first, our ride line. We are kind of running the standard ride line because there's not really a reason not to. So, both the grade 1 and the grade 2 do the same thing where when you ride on top of the previous one, you reveal Artisaria from your ride deck and then search a sound system order from your deck. And then Artisaria herself, she has a continuous ability. If you have two or more sound systems, she gets a crit. She has an act ability where you soul blast two, or you energy blast two. Sorry. Choose a sound system from either hand or drop zone and set it into the order zone. And then, if you put it from your hand, you draw a card. And then on attack, you counterblast one. Call a up to one shadow army token for each sound system in your order zone, and then you get your front row gets 5k for every two sound systems. So that is that. And then, of course, starting with kind of the no-brainer here, we have 3 copies of our Persona ride. Not many decks opt to not run their Persona rides. After that, I am choosing to run 6 sound systems, so 3 of each. We have Mega Romania. So this is the sound system that locks your opponent's cards. And then we have 3 copies of Shout and Shadow. This one, when it's played, lets you draw a card, and then you call a Shadow Army token to your rearguard circle. And both of the sound systems have the same thing where they cannot be played and can only be put into the order zone by Artisaria's effect. So you can't really get into a position where you're like doing both and kind of gaining a bunch of advantage and stacking up power. Artisaria tends to play kind of a slower game. We are also running one Regalis piece, so I am running Radiance Caliburn. Because you're just setting the sound systems with Artisaria's effect, that doesn't count as playing an order, so that gives you the space to play regular orders. So Caliburn is because you are counterblasting for Artisaria's effect, and as of right now, she does not have any built-in resource game as far as counterblast is concerned. So Caliburn is nice for countercharging and soul charging. A lot of the lyrical generics also use soul, and there have also been a lot of times where the draw 2 off of Caliburn has been helpful. Like sometimes your hand gets clogged up with sound systems, or you just want to dig deeper for like a Yuika or something like that. So Caliburn is nice to have. After that, we have 4 of the energy cyclers and 4 of the rainbow cyclers. So, uh, the gun cyclers, the energy ones, those are kind of ubiquitous by now. When you discard a ride line, you counterblast or energy blast to draw a card, and then the lyrical one is on place if you Persona Road. You give something 5k and it bounces back to your hand at the end of the turn. So, as of right now, while you do need energy for setting the sound system, you're really not using energy for anything else. So, being able to just dig deeper into your deck with this during the early parts of the game is nice. Unfortunately, once you start like paying for the sound system effect, you do kind of conflict a little bit in terms of the guard skill for the gun cycler, so that can be a little bit of a problem. And also, there are times where the 5k does matter. This deck struggles a bit with numbers sometimes, so just being able to like push your number up to 30k unboosted can be helpful. And then the Pride Cyclers, those get the personal shield ticket when you either call or discard them for ride by Soul Blasting 1, and then they get 5k on attack. So because Artisaria, I think, is one that wants to play kind of a slower game, the longer the game goes on, the more sound systems you can set, the more tokens you can make, and then if you ever get to a point where you have 4 sound systems and you can get 10k to the front row, that's pretty big. So, more defensive power, and of course, like the way Lyrical works with its staples, Yuika, you can obviously just bounce this back to your hand and kind of reuse the ability to get shield over and over again. And the other thing about this deck is, because of the way Artisaria works, sometimes you are just going to have to call over your rear guards. And so the fact that this is kind of a generic 15k that's not super duper important, it's not imperative that you recycle this back to your hand, you can afford to just kind of call over it with a Shadow Army and it's fine. So it's like good for getting defensive value in the early game. You can also use it for early aggro, especially if you opt to just like discard one of your sound systems instead. Like if you have this and the sound system in your hand, you can like call this for some aggression while discarding the sound system. It's pretty good. All right. Next up, we have our draw cards. So I'm running 3 of Veilfur. So this is the generic triple R from back in the last lyrical set. So this kind of became the go-to draw card over the dedicated grade 2 Lufer, simply because Lufer is locked to you having Artisaria on Vanguard, where Veilfur can go early. Plus, between the Pride Cycler and Yuika, which we'll get to, you do go through a decent amount of soul, so soul charging for you is pretty good. That being said, I am also actually playing Lufer, so this is not one that you see in a lot of other Artisaria lists. A lot of them just opt for like 4 copies of Veilfur. But I like having Lufer in the deck because while Veilfur does get 5,000 power to become 15k, it requires you to have a copy of your Vanguard in the soul. So that either means you soul charge the Persona ride, or the extra power is kind of delayed to the late game. One of the weaknesses of Artisaria is your turn 3 isn't amazing, right? Like, Veilfur is kind of a just 10k body until you can get a copy in the soul. This requires your opponent to be at grade 3, so if you go first, it doesn't do anything. Precia only gets 5k when you Persona ride, so I wanted Lufer for a little bit of extra early aggression in, like, the mid-game, you know? In addition to that, she also gives 10k shield, which I think actually is pretty helpful. Like, being able to go longer in the game is nice. Next up, 4 copies of Yuika. So, the eternal lyrical staple, the card that has had like 6 different printings and manages to always still be $30. We are playing 4 of it because, again, the way Artisaria works, where you're calling out tokens in the battle phase, means bouncing cards back to your hand is helpful. Especially a card like Lufer, right? Like, if you call over Lufer with a token, or you just bounce it back to your hand with Yuika, you get to counterblast 1, draw a card, and then you get to kind of recycle it as a 10k shield instead of it just going to the drop zone. If you call the Rainbow Cycler early, you get to Soul Blast, bounce it back, and then you have the opportunity to either discard or call it again for the Persona Shield. Like, Yuika is just too good. Next up, we have Trailing Notes Reverbera. So this is the Artisaria grade 1. It's kind of the in-archetype version of Yuika. So she gets 5k when you have a sound system in your order zone, and then at the end of the battle it boosted, you can put it into your soul to bounce something back to your hand. Yuika is still preferred because, similar to the dynamic between Veilfur and Lufer, the Yuika is just faster. You can use Yuika in the early game, and then, Reverbera, like, that needs you to be on Artisaria, so that's a little bit too slow, which is why we're only playing a couple of copies. That being said, like, if you can get to a position where you have her and Lufer, that is a 28k column, and then you, like, put it into Soul, bounce it back, and then you can call your tokens, that's pretty nice. And then now we're kind of getting to the no-brainers. So we have like 4 PGs, they're PGs. I don't know what you need me to say. As far as the overtrigger, I think all of them are pretty defensible. I just kind of went with the lyrical one because the way you spam out your board and make all these tokens, like the extra power is helpful, and your actual dedicated rear guards aren't super big on their own. So the extra 10k for the rest of the fight is helpful. After that, we're kind of running the typical like 8 crits. We're running front triggers because you already have a decent amount of draw power with like Veilfer, Lufer. The Pride Cycler gets you extra 10k shields, so I don't think you really need the draws, like front triggers do just fine. And then, of course, 4 heals. So that's kind of my deck list that I'm running with right now. I thought it ran pretty smoothly. The only thing is that I seem to have the curse where I don't get Persona rides, but we can elaborate on that more as we talk about the games. So, because it's kind of a small shop, we ran 4 rounds with cut to top 4. Like I said, I end up in 7th place. So, round 1, I played against the Moon Man, Vice Ruger. Uh, it seemed like my opponent wasn't running the gold order, so I think they just never really made their columns too like overwhelmingly big that I couldn't guard them. It ended up going to like turn 5 or so. So the thing is like because I am cursed, I don't think I ever drew a persona ride that game. I damaged like 2 of them, but because I could use Megaromania to like lock down one of their columns, and they like didn't really have super huge unguardable numbers because they weren't playing the gold order, or if they were I didn't see it, then I just like PG'd on a double crit. uh After that they got another crit with all of their deck thinning, but again I kind of kept myself at lower damage. They lost tempo because of the Megaromania, so it just never really threatened me that much, and I was able to grind them out. I lost the die roll for that one and went second. Round 2, I played against Levidross. I won that die roll. So that one I think came down to my opponent just playing a little too passively. Like they kept harassing my rear guards and kind of keeping me at lower damage. And so as the game went on, I'm like, okay, they are drawing pretty aggressively with the Infinity Eyes. And as it got longer and longer, I'm noticing that they're getting pretty close to like deck out territory. And so eventually, like we grinded it down to the point where they had very few cards in the deck. I think went all the way to turn 7. That one I did draw one persona ride and no persona rides after that. It was just like, all right, no, we're grinding, and because he just left me at like 2 or 3 damage the entire game, I was able to just kind of take it 1 damage at a time, just keep up my own advantage, and eventually grinded it down to the point where they simultaneously took 6 damage and decked out at the same time. Round 3, I played against Bob Sagra. I got my ass beat on that one. I drew pretty badly. Like, I PG'd the first time they swung in with their Vanguard, then the second time they swung in with it, I didn't have the PG, so I just had to take the crit and get pushed to 5. I did lock them down with Mega Romania and kept them on 2 attacks for, like, the first couple of turns, but it just didn't really matter all that much. Yeah, didn't draw my Persona ride, so turn 5, they Persona rode, they called the Restander, and then, my hand was like 5 cards because I just couldn't draw anything good to save my life and just got beaten. And then round 4, I played against a Varga player, so they were playing a very aggressive version of the deck. So they went all in on the Vergila ride line. They're just like dumping their hand early, attacking with everything. uh dr- they ended up kind of lean on hand size because they're just dumping out all of their cards early like that. Still got pretty close because they were also playing that grade 2 that like when it's retired gives your Vanguard 5k, 10 if you're Malworm. So they swung in with like a 60k Varga with a crit, but I had 2 PGs and the over trigger for the divine skill turn, so I was able to like survive all of that, and because they never had more than 5 cards in their hand, I just beat on the follow-up. So, yeah, that is it for that tournament, and this is kind of my deck list right now. So, I am already kind of thinking about the next iteration of this list. So, as far as alternate options go, I do think like replacing Lufer with Francet is a pretty defensible choice. So the benefit for Francet is it gives you a much stronger early game. So instead of just like call Valefor, call Yuika, or call like the Pride Cycler and Yuika, you can go like Francet Yuika plus one of these two for like better tri laning and getting in more pressure early game. But you can also just kind of go in the opposite direction where instead of trying to make the deck more aggressive, you make it more defensive because, like I said, the longer the game goes on, I think the better Artisaria becomes because, you can use Megaromania, lock down your opponent, kind of deny their tempo. Like, if they have their own form of removal or they realize you're deliberately playing slower and start to try and harass your rear guards, you have Shout and Shadow, and as you get to like turn 6 and you're at that point where you've both exhausted yourselves, I think Artisaria can kind of keep trucking because Shout and Shadow not only lets you draw a card to try and find more rear guards, it also makes you a Shadow Army token. And if your opponent isn't playing something like Messiah or Chronojet or Varga that like easily wipe your board, you probably just have leftover Shadow Army tokens from Artis Aria's effects. So you're always gonna kinda have some board presence, and then the more sound systems you have set up, the more tokens you make, so the bigger the number gets when you have your like re-swings. Artisaria has a crit from turn 4 onwards once you have the two sound systems, so the longer the game goes, the less likely they are to still have like the PGs or the over triggers if they had to use it earlier in the game. So you could maybe even just get in with the crit ability. And so in that vein, I could see you maybe just running like the full 4 20k fronts. You can probably play like the Jewel Beast because that's another 20k shield. I even could see myself cutting down to only 6 criticals and playing a couple copies of the Soul Front just because even though I have Valefor in the deck, because I'm using so much of it for like the Persona Shield and Yuika, like I still found myself needing it in some circumstances. And heck, maybe you could even go in with like the purple OT as like a fifth heal that you could be playing. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm at with Artisaria right now. I really, really like this deck. It's a whole lot of fun. It really does what I really wanted out of things like Odium and Blangmire, I like the idea of a deck where you're building up to this big kill turn. The problem with those two is like once you blow the divine skill, it kind of does feel like you've done everything, right? Like you don't really have a whole lot of follow up after that. Whereas Artisaria, it feels like the longer the game goes, the more it kind of scales up. So it feels like you're building to this big finisher and you have Regna Romania to control your opponent's tempo and try to drag the game out longer. It's really nice. I really like this. And I am absolutely looking forward to set 8 when we get Lumi Noel, the grade 2 that makes a token. Very likely that just replaces the energy cycler because now energy will be at a premium. So that is it for this video. If you liked, leave a like, leave a comment. What are you doing with your Artisaria lists? Do you like this deck? Do you hate the idea of playing against it with them locking you down? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye!